Okay, I tell you the first thing I feel like talking about
All right.
is, can you explain to me why everyone here is upset? What is there to protest about? This is, especially in Oregon, these to me look like the most fortunate people I have ever seen in my life. Marijuana is legal. Drugs are decriminalized. You have government programs for literally every need one could have. What is there? And then you want to defund the police for what?
Okay, so I'm going to start with that last one. First of all, defunding the police, in my opinion, is a bad idea. Okay? I'm not going to get political or anything like that because there's enough divisiveness. But people that want to defund the police are a little naive. There's a reason that we have police, okay, and that's because not everyone's going to follow the laws. The police are supposed to be there to protect society from these misled elements.
I agree, though, that there should be a mental health division.
Now, what happened, and this is my take.
But that's not defunding, that's adding funding that you need to do.
Right. What happened is back in the 90s, early 2000s, is we changed, as a country, we changed what we thought the police should be doing. There were several incidents, and you can look them up. There was a active shooting event in Los Angeles. 2 guys in body armor with assault rifles.
The LA bank robbery, the bank heist that was super popular. It was 2 guys that literally took on the LA
police
system and did a pretty good job for 2 guys.
2 guys tearing up the city, and the police could not stop them. Okay, what the police eventually had to do is they walked into a gun shop and armed themselves to deal with these 2 individuals. And then you had other incidents, acts of terror, both domestic and foreign.
Hang on, I just want to make sure people have an appreciation for that. The police literally had to go to a gun shop and make purchases while on duty in the middle of a fight.
Shooters, right.
They're like, hold on.
The big turning point, I think, was actually 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? When the Twin Towers came down, a lot of people died, including, firefighters and police that responded to that situation. And I believe the American mentality changed from your job is to protect and serve us to your job is to get the bad guys. And that's a different, it seems like it's not all that much, but that's a different way of thinking, and that made our police forces focus on a different style of training. Okay? In the past, they had been trained to respond, protect, and so on and so forth. You still had your specialized units, your strategic police units, SWAT teams and whatnot. Okay? But now, 9/11 happens, and almost all of the police forces switch to a more tactical training.
Hang on, we're going to take a quick break. When we return, we're going to talk about whether or not defunding the police is going to guarantee that we have lower class police officers. 1 second. All right, so the thing that I was concerned about before we took a pause was that if we defund the police, or if it's not just defund the police, but if we have an antagonistic attitude towards the police, we're going to end up with a lot more aggressive police, ones that welcome hostility. Because from my life experience, I've noticed that the people who have a tendency to be more cerebral will avoid unnecessary conflict and will usually go down. I mean, they'll pull up with it to a degree, like if someone becomes a police officer, they're expecting a degree of hostility and degree of confrontation, but they're expecting that to be in a certain context. Once that context has been removed, now you have issue.
Well, and I understand your concern. I don't think it would necessarily make the police officers we get more aggressive, per se. My concerns with the defunding the police is then they're not going to have the adequate training or resources to deal with serious situations when they crop up. Instead of defunding the police, I believe they need to be retrained back into a more social role like they used to be. They as members of the community out there protecting, trying to make sure everyone's safe, versus get the bad guys.
What do you think of two class of police? A misdemeanor police and a felony police. And the misdemeanor police would function more like the police in the United Kingdom, where they wouldn't carry guns and they would be dispatched for like mental health issues or petty crimes. And then you have the felony police, and you just keep those cops the exact way they are now.
Well, and that's the way I think it was originally intended. I mean, that's what the SWAT team originally was supposed to be for, was a tactical unit that the police could deploy to hostile situations like armed robberies in progress, hostage situations, so on and so forth. The problem is that almost all of our police force in the United States now has been almost militarized due to the events of active shooter incidents and terrorist attacks. And again, in the early 2000s, the United States kind of switched from, your job is to help the community and protect us, to your job is to go get the bad guys. And it's that way of thinking that needs to change. We need to switch back to police are there to help, defend, protect, and serve the community, not get the bad guys. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how all this ends up playing out. But I don't know. I've seen in other countries where police are thought of as, heroes. Like, they're highly educated. They're basically on par with attorneys who have a much better reputation than the attorneys here. And I wanted to talk to you about this because I found this to be very interesting while I have you here. What do you think of all this alien stuff that's been transpiring as of late? It's no longer now something that could just be brushed off or taken as just the speech of kooks. There's now proof. There's... First off...
Okay, let's quantify that.
Yeah, we do need to quantify that, because there are people who are... Like, there's this guy who Joe Rogan keeps praising. I forget his name. I think it's Bob Lazar. I'm not sure. But it was... he supposedly worked for the government, and then they erased his records, and they erased his... whatever. But I've listened to him. I've had real physicists dissect his little speeches and stuff. And they said, first off, so supposedly his claim to fame is he names an element. And a legit physicist, like I believe his name is Arvin Ash, did an entire video showing how he can name the next 10 elements that are coming just by like reason and whatever. So there's nothing special about this guy. But clearly there is oddball things happening to the point where things are disappearing, things are... for example, Fravor, the two naval pilots that were on 60 Minutes, you haven't seen it, so I'll narrate real quick. they basically got two naval pilots.
Army.
They got two naval pirates to narrate what was happening on their radar. And those were totally credible. So I believe them. And he was saying that one of them looked like a Tic Tac, and it was doing things that would have been impossible. So to give people an idea of the impossibility of this, the amount of G-forces a normal human being can withstand temporarily before catastrophe is something like 9. The amount of, in F-17, a fighter jet can withstand is something like 17. And these things were doing maneuvers which would calculate to them being able to withstand something absurd like 3,000, like uncalculable maneuvers. And not only that, but they were moving through air and water with no, like, they weren't stunned. They didn't take pause at all between the two. There was also no propulsion system between these things. So, for example, like a rocket looks like a rocket because it has to. That's the only way, But this was doing things that was outside of its physical parameters.
Outside of what we know. Okay, so to quantify it, confirming UFOs. That doesn't necessarily confirm aliens, but UFOs, unidentified flying objects. Now, I'm not sure how old these reports were or whatnot, and again, I haven't seen the 60 Minutes yet, but there have been reports of UFOs for a long time. That started way back when we first started with balloons. There were reports of UFOs. But here's the thing, okay? We can't identify them. You and I cannot identify them. Think about the time that we live in. There are people out there that are able to purchase drones of various sizes and fly them, okay? Not everything in our sky is going to be identified. And some of the stuff, some of these UFOs are quite possibly U.S. military projects. So of course they're not going to identify them because of their classified nature.
So in short, are you saying you believe we have now entered the age where Joe Blow engineer can, on his off time, just, diddle, and maybe he's some type of super genius, and he makes his own little drone that's capable of creating holograms or whatever, and this is just a troll project.
It could be just a troll. Again, I'm not discounting anything. The probability that it is an alien race, however, I have to say is low. And here's my reasoning behind that, and everyone's, of course, allowed to agree or disagree, call me an idiot or whatnot. Aside from our planet and our natural resources, we haven't shown any intelligent alien race a reason to make contact with us. Okay, we're still too busy fighting amongst ourselves. We're obviously a warlike species that can't even make peace with our own kind. Why would any spacefaring, intelligent being want to contact us right now? Other than to conquer and take our resources for themselves.
I think people might be looking at, alien contact the wrong way. Okay, so when the FBI, seizes a potential criminal's computer, what do? They just copy the hard drive, and then they study their copy of that hard drive. They don't even mess with the actual computer, right?
That's right, because they don't want to destroy the evidence, and they can always who cares if they destroy their copy? They can just make another copy.
Right. So my theory is that if aliens are real, they would just do like a laser scan one time around the planet and immediately have downloaded everything, every atom position on the planet, and that would be it. So when I watched the 60 Minutes, and one of the credible pilots is saying this phenomena has been going on for years, I find that quite puzzling, because if it is a drone, the drone, because if it's going to be an alien, it's going to be an exploratory drone. And more likely than not, it's going to be a drone of a civilization that's probably long gone. My concern was, if you mess with this thing, does it have some type of defense mechanism? Does it scan and does it see, is there a nuclear weapon nearby? If so, does it attack?
And to answer that question, we have to look at our own probes that we've sent out into space. Mm-hmm. None of them have been armed. Now, granted, our technology is probably going to be well behind any other species technology, that if that species has the ability to visit our system, because light years are pretty long, it's a pretty fair distance, then I agree, they would be able to get whatever information they needed about us just from accessing all the radio signals and whatnot.
Yeah, it'd be like an instant thing. It wouldn't be like they're going to sit there and study and build a base. They're not going to need to sit around.
If, maybe 20 minutes of listening to all our broadcasts, and then go to the dark side of the moon and sit there and go, what? These people are crazy. Let's move on. So if it's an unmanned vehicle from an extraterrestrial source, it may be a little more limited. That's true, because our own probes are fairly, simplistic when you think of space exploration. I mean, they have little to no propulsion capabilities. I mean, we launched them out there and we can't retrieve them. They're going to keep going.
I tell you something that's kind of funny. So William Shatner is actually into like this alien stuff in real life, the Star Trek Captain Kirk. And he's my least favorite character on Star Trek. I like The Next Generation. I love Voyager. But I can't stand William Shatner. And for the most part, aside from a few episodes, I wasn't a fan of the first Star Trek. But listening to him talk like out of character, just as himself, is very fascinating. He's really intelligent, and I actually enjoyed listening to him pontificate on these alien phenomena. Now, he said something, and if it turns out to be true, I'm going to commit suicide, because I'm done with this life instantly if it turns out to be true. He says that he thinks it may be beings from other dimensions. If there are beings from other dimensions that are coming in and out of this dimension, I'm done, because then you can't tell anything. Who's what? Are you talking to a person? Is this a being from another dimension posing as a person to troll you? I mean, it's going to be a nightmare, this world, if this...
Well, okay, so to clarify some points. Our universe is huge, and there are so many planets that there has to be so many planets. I mean, they've detected how many, and it's only in this one small section of the universe. So, is there other life in this universe? The answer is most unequivocally yes. There has to be. There's too much room and too much stuff. If you want to talk about different dimensions, there are a lot of physicists, a lot of scientists do believe in the multiverse theory, and we've discussed it a little bit ourselves. There are, universes right beside each other, some so close that there may be some interaction between them.
I somehow differentiate. I don't know exactly how, but I do somehow differentiate between a parallel universe and a demon realm. I can handle a parallel universe, not a demon realm. I'm not exactly sure how I differentiate between the two, but instinctively I know I do, and somehow I know people listening can understand this.
Okay, and I understand what you're saying. You're talking about a demonic dimension with, hellfire and the whole thing. Okay. And that's fine.
Goblins. And that was another thing that scares me. So this report, we're going to have to follow up on this because the report comes out next month. That's a forced report by the government where they force them to disclose everything. And I've heard chatter. So this is, like, a lot of this has been by Tucker Carlson, like, pushing this. And, like, Marco Rubio, people that you would think would never, like, take this seriously. But they have taken it very seriously. And supposedly there are dog-like creatures and something like a goblin. I don't know what the hell a goblin is. But if I see a goblin, I'm gone.
Okay, a goblin is a little green man-type creature that, they're not very nice. But anyway.
Yeah, if a goblin appears out of nowhere.
So, I wouldn't be too concerned about it, first off. Are there alternate dimensions? Are there parallel universes? The answer is most probably. But we don't have the ability at this time to confirm or deny their existence. If we're talking about dimensions, we live in a three-dimensional world, you and I. Okay? How do you... And there was an experiment done, and I can't remember the scientist that did it, but you can look it up. How would we appear to a two-dimensional being? Okay? 2 dimensions. Height and width.
Right, or you could...
No depth.
Well, okay, so I've actually heard this conversation played in reverse and going forward. So you could also argue to like a 6-dimensional being, we would appear to be like a worm. And our lives would be like from beginning to end, and they could interject at any point in time. Right. So they would see you as like a worm-like creature. So hypothetically, if an intelligent creature does exist in the 6th dimension, it could screw with us any way it wanted to.
And there's nothing we could do, and we wouldn't be able to perceive it.
Yeah, or we would perceive it as something it wasn't.
That's right, because, okay, so a 2-dimensional being would perceive us, a 3-dimensional being, in only 2 dimensions. So They wouldn't really perceive what we are.
Right, so something like in Flatland would only perceive us as like a flat...
Well, they would just perceive... maybe our height or our width. But they wouldn't be able to perceive our depth because that's all 2 dimensions is height and width.
But there's nothing living in 2 dimensions that we can screw with. That we can perceive.
That we know of. Again, we live in a 3-dimensional world. We know that 2 dimensions exist.
But the argument is a creature from the 6th dimension can easily mess with us in the 3rd dimension. So why isn't there...
If they are aware of us.
Why wouldn't... Right, so what would factor into their awareness?
Are we aware of any 2-dimensional creatures?
Well, this is what I'm trying to say. Like, why would we assume that there's living creatures in other dimensions that are intelligent if we don't see anything in the 2 dimension or...
All right, so you are a big fan of Star Trek.
Mm.
They've talked about 2-dimensional and multi-dimensional creatures in Star Trek on numerous episodes. It's already been theorized that there are 2-dimensional beings.
Why can't we perceive them?
Because they're 2-dimensionals and we're not aware of the 2-dimensional universe.
Wouldn't that be easy for us to be aware of since it's only 2 dimensions?
Not necessarily, because we see everything in 3 dimensions. We live in a 3-dimensional world.
Right, but if you look at your cell phone or if you're playing PlayStation, what's on your image is actually 2 dimensions, right?
It is actually 2 dimensions, but we gain perspective based on how because the images were shot in 3 dimensions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? For example...
so you're saying a pure 2 dimension on every front would react different than
we would
that.
Perceive it differently than we do a 2-dimensional image on a screen.
Mm.
Because we know the screen's 2-dimensional. We get that. But it's a 2-dimensional image in a 3-dimensional world.
So that narrative about fish in a pond and how easy it would be for them to just reach in and grab doesn't necessarily hold true.
That's right, because again, just because it's a 6-dimensional being doesn't mean they're necessarily aware of us. As another example, and maybe more practical, are we necessarily aware of the ants running around below us?
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, if we're paying enough attention, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But normally, when it comes to ants, we don't care.
Mm-hmm.
A 6-dimensional being could, and you already said they would perceive us as a worm. Mm-hmm. How much do we care about worms?
Well, I thought about that because that's a common argument that aliens wouldn't have anything to do with us because they would perceive us as lowlives. And I thought, well, maybe, but we keep pets, and pets are, by definition, lowlives compared to us. But why do we keep them? We keep them because we can perceive them expressing gratitude. And for some reason, that means something.
The primary reason that human beings keep pets is for unconditional love and companionship. Excuse me.
Okay, but that's another word for gratitude. Fair enough.
Fair enough. But, so, an alien species, no matter what dimensions they are, another reason we keep pets is we tend to keep pets that are more like us than not. Okay? For example, the majority of people are attracted to cute and fuzzy.
Mm-hmm.
You have some that like the scaly, but the point is it's familiar. There are certain pets that, certain animals that no one is going to be like, I want that as a pet. No.
Well, I think humans would have that same effect on aliens. At the very least.
Possibly, but again, we're not familiar to them.
We have to be on some level.
Maybe, but if a human being was made the pet of an alien, it would be an exotic pet.
Right. I agree with that.
But that's as far as it would go.
Maybe, though, because we're social creatures, they would probably have a social hierarchy, right? We're capable of expressing gratitude. They probably have a system of expressing gratitude. We started off as hunter-gatherers, and that's how we evolved intelligence. They probably went down the same path. You know,
No, possibly, but again, we're making a lot of assumptions here, and it's fine for random, hypotheses thrown back and forth. But the bulk of the matter is, right now, there's no proof that aliens are visiting.
mm,
We can be fairly certain that yes, there is alien life out there. There's just too many worlds, too many galaxies, too many planets out there for there not to be some other intelligent being.
mm-hmm.
Are they visiting us? There's arguments that they visited us in the past and they're visiting us now still. The Egyptians had advanced mathematics and architectural skills, but we haven't found that we know of any alien bodies. We haven't found any alien technology.
Well, speaking of bodies, that's another thing I think about. Like, what if their bodies are designed so differently that they experience pleasure? Like, they have an added fill in the blank. And so they live to service that, to seek ways to pleasure this organ that they have.
That they're a bunch of hedonists.
Yeah, but their mechanism for pleasure is something we can't wrap our heads around. It would be like a blind guy trying to understand sight. Just something that they have that's exclusive unto them.
Well,
and
hold on. More than likely, there is going to be something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because...
Like a snork.
Kinda, yeah. Any other intelligent life in this universe will probably have several key differences than ourselves. Eventually, we could, learn what those differences in and learn how to, this is what they find good, whereas we find it not so good. But that just takes experience. That's like when you meet someone new, a stranger, you don't know what they like and what they don't like. So it's just a matter of communications. But let's take a look at our own planet, okay? Everything here on Earth is an earthling, okay? You go down into the Marianas Trench, and you're going to see fish and stuff that look like they're from a different world, but they're from this world.
You'll see
you see some really weird stuff down there. But the point is, and it sounds kind of like you're angling towards, what if it's kind of like an interspecies relationship, intimate relationship between a human being and this alien per se. Is that possible? Maybe. Is anything going to come out of it? Yeah, probably not.
Well, I'm just curious how alien life, like if I get better hypotheses as to how they would possibly want to spend their time, I think I could do a better job calculating as to whether or not they'd have any interest in actually coming to see us.
But again, we'd have to know about them, and the only way to know about them is for them to stop and say, "Hey, how you doing?" And right now, no one's been interested in doing that.
I mean, is it a given that an intelligent species would want to spend their time gaining knowledge? And then if so, would it be ultimately a mathematical calculation in terms of, this is their lifespan, these are the ages in which they value knowledge, this is the speed, this is how they spend their day, and then you can just work it out into...
In my estimation, any intelligent life that we meet from outer space that has come to us is going to be interested in gaining knowledge. Because it was knowledge and science that drove them into space to begin with. Okay? That's why I'm not really as concerned about an alien invasion as some others. Because any species that's devoted the resources to cross the vast gulf of space isn't going to be as interested in invasion as scientific pursuit.
Do you think it's possible to be so smart that you know everything with just a little bit of information?
Yeah.
Like they could, study the fact, ultimately we're all made of atoms. So they can calculate, okay, atom space, it can only da-da-da-da-da, and all of a sudden they know everything and they don't need to explore, they don't need to do, because they're mathematicians and their equipment is so sophisticated. The same way we can tell the composition of something in 2 seconds with a laser, they can do a much more advanced calculation and know everything with just an instant scan of sorts.
I can only speak from the human perspective, okay? From the human perspective, even though we have the answers, even though we know the answers, the human spirit has still been one to, well, I know this is true, but I want to go look anyway.
Well, because we need something to do.
That's right, because how boring. Just a little information and you get all the answers? No, that's boring. Let's actually go out and take a look.
Mm. Do you think boredom is universal?
I do. I mean, whenever someone, a human, for example, is bored, they try to find ways to entertain themselves. Fishing, notwithstanding. But, sometimes we do like to be bored. Sometimes we like nothing to do and just sit there and go, this is great. That's laziness, not boredom. But, I think no matter what species, when it comes to an intelligent species, I think that boredom is going to be universal. Because if it's truly an intelligent species, they're going to want to learn more. They're going to want to know more, because that's just what intelligence does. It drives you to try and continually improve yourself.
Do you think violence is universal?
Unfortunately, I do think violence is universal as well. But violence, again, is a part of evolution to, procure a mate, procure food, establish yourself so that your genes can continue on down the line. Eventually, I believe intelligence will outweigh violence and become dominant, and violence will slowly go away. But just like, if you're breeding a dog or something, there are good traits and bad traits, and until you breed the bad traits out of there completely, they're still there.
Do you think it's likely that if there is alien life, it will be a situation where, they have to eat other potentially conscious creatures on their planet to sustain or enhance themselves? Like this eating thing, do you think this is an exclusive thing or more of a universal thing?
No, it's not exclusive. Life eats life, no matter what. Okay? And people are like, oh, you shouldn't eat animals, it's bad, or whatever. It's fine if you want to be a vegetarian or a vegan, that's fine, I understand. But think about this, you're still consuming life when you eat plant, when you eat vegetables and fruit. Was a plant. It was alive at one point. Mm-hmm. It comes down to life consumes life to perpetuate life. All forms of life consume some other form of life in one way or another.
So you can't see creatures like us but powered by the sun?
No, I can see it. What you're talking about is photosynthesis.
Right.
And the majority of plants do use photosynthesis, but they also require water. They also require nutrients from the soil. It's not just photosynthesis.
Mm-hmm.
Do I think that it's possible that we can find an intelligent photosynthetic creature? Well, yeah, it's quite possible.
Yeah, well, what if we were to run into one that was like Spock-like, that was, and this whole idea of violence in eating things, like how horrific they would find that.
But, and again, we can only base this on our own experience. A photosynthetic creature, something that uses photosynthesis, chlorophyll, whatever, to absorb sunlight, they still need additional nutrients in water and, the soil for plants. So if we found...
Yeah, but like having to kill something and eat its flesh is pretty extreme, I think.
We're carnivores. If we found a photosynthetic life form, it's not going to be a carnivore. So yes, to them, the fact that we eat meat...
We would have to be such extreme monsters that...
No, they won't think that necessarily.
You think they...
Because from an ecological standpoint, even on a completely separate world, there are going to be predators and there's going to be prey. And they would have evolved on a world where this is normal.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter whether that world's Earth or some world we have no idea about. There's going to end up being predator and prey. That's natural selection at work. Why should I eat all of this? Why should I compete with everyone to eat this grass when I can just eat the people that eat the grass?
It makes me recall an episode of Star Trek where Neelix had to take over and speak for the ship because the captain had put her hands on her hips and offended an alien race.
I remember the episode. That was actually the smallest part of the episode. The main part was about a macro virus. Yes. And that's because that didn't have anything to do with whether they ate or did not. That was a misinterpretation of body language, because the alien race that was in that episode used body language and gestures as part of their communication with one another. And her putting her hands on her hips was considered very rude and vulgar.
Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking, look at all the things that we do, from eating to, like, there's got to be something that's going to trigger some type of vulgarity.
Well, yeah, and again, that all comes down to, until we meet, we know nothing about whatever species we meet.
Mm-hmm.
And they may know nothing about us. It comes down to meeting a stranger on the street. Okay? For example, when you and I first met, we knew next to nothing about each other.
So do you think if there is an encounter, it's going to be peaceful and we're going to enhance as a species, or it's going to be peaceful at first, they're going to then turn hostile? Or
I'm hoping it will be peaceful. Again, I believe that any race that we will potentially meet in space, if they're a spacefaring race already, that chances are they're going to be very intelligent and they're going to be science driven. Yes, there are going to be exceptions to that rule, but for the most part, I believe they will be scientifically driven with the urge to explore, not necessarily to conquer.
Because ideally, we're going to want to stop them and be like, hey, listen, there's going to be crazy people on our planet. They're gonna throw rocks at you and other things.
Hopefully by the time we get to that point, we have our own problems figured out. And that's why we're out there in space, is because we've gotten the majority of this world's problems figured out. Social problems. Mm-hmm. Hopefully. But again, yes, there is a chance for misunderstanding. And it's on us to understand that there's going to be misunderstandings with any other intelligent race that we meet, and to exercise patience and restraint.
Mm-hmm.
Because, we are a bunch of predators.
Mm.
We are evolved from predators, and we still have, violent tendencies. So it's on us to practice, understanding, restraint, and patience.
I just thought it was funny that on the CD that we launched in this space in the 70s that Carl Sagan was a part of, we intentionally left out like all our bad traits.
And and I don't agree with that. We are who we are. We, as a species, if we don't like who we are, then we need to strive to be better. But the point is we need to let anyone we come in contact with...
I mean, at the very least, we should have added the disclaimer.
We need to be honest with whoever we meet. Right. Whatever.
But yeah, that was the thing. I was just like, you now have given them a reason to just come over here angry. They're gonna hold up the CD, and then they're gonna point, and then they're gonna hold up the CD again, and then they're gonna do this where they play back and forth, and then they're gonna shake their head, and then they're gonna slam the CD on the table. And they're going to get back in their ships, and then buttons are going to be pushed. And on that note, we'll finish this. I guess we'll finish this when the UFO report comes out, because that's going to be interesting, right?
Yeah, should be.
Thank you for tuning in. Subscribe. That was fun.